Most people try to change their lives by adjusting their habits, their routines, or their environment, but they overlook the most powerful driver of all, identity. What you consistently do flows naturally from who you believe you are. Until that internal definition changes, external changes will always be temporary. You can force behavior for a season, but identity always pulls you back to what feels familiar. Your identity is the story you tell yourself about yourself. It is the lens through which you interpret opportunity, pressure, failure, and success. If you see yourself as someone who struggles, you will subconsciously create struggle. If you see yourself as someone who rises, you will look for ways to rise, even when circumstances are unfavorable. Behavior does not lead identity. Identity leads behavior. This is why motivation fades, but self-image endures. When you act out of alignment with who you believe you are, your mind experiences friction. Eventually, it resolves that friction by adjusting your actions back to match your identity, not the other way around. This is why people sabotage progress right after making it. They haven't failed because the strategy was wrong. They failed because their self-concept couldn't sustain the new level. Their identity did not match the results they were producing, so subconsciously, they returned to what felt normal. You will never outperform the way you see yourself for long. Skills may elevate you temporarily, but identity determines your ceiling. If your self-image is small, your results will always find a way to shrink back down to meet it. Your identity dictates what you tolerate. It determines which conversations you avoid, which standards you enforce, and which excuses you accept. When someone upgrades their identity, their tolerance for chaos, disrespect, and mediocrity drops automatically. No motivation is required. The moment your identity changes, your decision-making changes. Choices that once felt difficult become obvious. Actions that once required discipline now feel natural. You stop negotiating with behaviors that no longer belong to who you've decided to be. Identity is reinforced by repetition. Every time you act in alignment with the person you are becoming, that identity strengthens. Every time you act out of alignment, you weaken it. This is why consistency matters more than intensity in personal transformation. People who experience lasting change don't ask, "What should I do?" They ask, "Who must I become?" That question shifts the focus from external tactics to internal alignment. The answers guide behavior effortlessly. Your environment responds to your identity. People treat you based on how you show up. Opportunities find those who carry themselves like they belong at a higher level. When your identity shifts, the world begins to interact with you differently. Identity is not discovered, it is decided. You are not waiting to find out who you are. You are choosing it consciously or unconsciously every day. What you repeatedly think, say, and do becomes evidence that your mind uses to define you. Past failures only have power if you allow them to define your identity. When you see setbacks as events rather than labels, they lose their grip. Identity rooted in growth cannot be imprisoned by history. The strongest identities are built on standards, not emotions. Feelings fluctuate, but standards remain firm. When your identity is anchored in non-negotiable standards, your behavior stabilizes even under pressure. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall or rise to the level of your identity. Goals describe where you want to go, but identity determines whether you stay there once you arrive. When identity shifts first, habits follow, discipline becomes lighter, confidence increases without force, and consistency becomes a byproduct rather than a struggle. Every result you experience is the product of what you have allowed into your mind. Long before outcomes show up in your life, they are planted as ideas, beliefs, and assumptions. Nothing manifests externally that has not first been introduced internally. What you feed your mind daily becomes the blueprint your actions follow. Your mind is constantly processing information, even when you are not consciously paying attention. Conversations, music, news, social media, and casual comments all leave impressions. Over time, these impressions form expectations, and expectations quietly shape decisions. You do not act based on reality, you act based on your perception of reality. That perception is built from repeated inputs. If your inputs are filled with fear, limitation, and scarcity, your decisions will mirror those themes regardless of your talent or ambition. Consistent exposure outweighs occasional intention. Hearing something once rarely changes behavior, but hearing it repeatedly installs it as truth. This is why environments matter more than motivation. Inputs shape mindset long before effort is applied. Your emotional state is heavily influenced by what you consume. Uplifting inputs elevate energy and focus, while negative inputs drain drive and clarity. Over time, emotional patterns solidify, and those patterns influence how boldly or cautiously you move. Focus is not just a matter of discipline. It is a matter of diet. A distracted mind is often the result of fragmented input. When information is scattered, thinking becomes scattered and execution suffers. Most people underestimate how much of their behavior is reactive. News headlines, opinions, and trends pull attention and emotions without permission. When you do not choose your inputs intentionally, someone else chooses them for you. Beliefs are formed when inputs align with repetition and emotion. This is why emotionally charged content is so powerful. It bypasses logic and installs conclusions directly into the subconscious, where behavior is born. Every skill you acquire begins as input. Knowledge precedes competence, and competence precedes confidence. What you study, listen to, and practice determines what you are capable of executing under pressure. Your standards are influenced by the examples you observe. When surrounded by mediocrity, average performance feels acceptable. When exposed to excellence, you recalibrate what is possible for yourself. Silence is also an input. Stillness allows reflection, integration, and strategic thinking. Constant consumption leaves no space for insight, which is why clarity often emerges when noise is reduced. Your self-talk is shaped by external voices. Over time, what you hear becomes what you say to yourself. That internal dialogue drives behavior more consistently than external instruction ever could. High performers guard their attention fiercely. They understand that attention is a currency and that where it is invested determines the return. They choose inputs that sharpen judgment rather than dull it. Inputs influence not just what you think, but what you notice. Awareness follows programming. When your mind is trained on opportunity, you see openings. When it is trained on threat, you see barriers. When you take control of your inputs, you take C, control of your trajectory. Thought patterns stabilize, confidence strengthens, and decisions align more consistently with long-term outcomes. Discomfort is not a signal that something is wrong. It is often evidence that something is changing. Growth introduces tension because it stretches you beyond what is familiar. The unfamiliar always feels uncomfortable before it feels normal. Every level of progress requires leaving behind a previous version of yourself. That departure creates resistance, not from the world, but from your own habits and conditioning. The mind naturally prefers what it knows, even when what it knows is limiting. Avoidance disguises itself as logic. The mind rationalizes comfort by labeling risk as impractical or unnecessary. In reality, what is being protected is not safety, but familiarity. Discomfort reveals where expansion is available. The tasks you delay, the conversations you hesitate to initiate, and the responsibilities you postpone often point directly to the next level of development. Growth hides behind hesitation. Confidence is not built in comfort. It is built through repeated exposure to uncertainty. Each time you act without guarantees, you teach yourself that you are capable of adapting. Resistance increases before breakthroughs. The more meaningful the growth, the louder the internal pushback. This friction is not a barrier. It is a doorway that must be walked through. Discomfort disciplines focus. When something challenges you, attention sharpens. You become more present, more intentional, and more aware of your capabilities and limitations. Most people negotiate with discomfort instead of moving through it. They wait for fear to subside, not realizing fear shrinks only after action is taken. Delay gives discomfort authority. Skills are forged under strain. Mental, emotional, and professional strength develop through Sure, ease does not refine ability. Resistance does. Discomfort restructures identity. When you repeatedly show yourself that you can do hard things, your self-image updates. You begin to trust your capacity rather than question it. Growth demands temporary instability. Old routines loosen before new ones solidify. That unstable phase is uncomfortable, but it is also necessary for recalibration. Avoiding discomfort often leads to a different kind of pain. The pain of regret, stagnation, and unrealized potential lingers longer than the pain of effort. Comfort delays growth but does not eliminate consequence. Discomfort exposes priorities. What you are willing to endure reveals what matters most. Commitment becomes visible, not in ease, but in endurance. Those who advance faster are not braver. They are more willing to feel uneasy. They understand that comfort is not a requirement for action. Movement comes first, confidence follows. The ability to sit with discomfort without retreating increases resilience. Over time, what once felt overwhelming becomes manageable, and what once felt difficult becomes routine. Discipline is the quiet force that separates those who intend to succeed from those who actually do. It operates without drama, without applause, and without the need for external motivation. While others wait for the right mood or moment, discipline moves forward regardless of conditions. Talent creates potential, but discipline determines how much of that potential is realized. Skill may open the door, but discipline keeps you in the room long enough to master the craft. Without it, even the most gifted individuals plateau early. Discipline removes the burden of constant decision-making. When standards are set in advance, actions follow automatically. This frees mental energy for execution rather than negotiation with resistance. Consistency multiplies results, and discipline makes consistency possible. Small actions repeated daily produce outcomes that occasional bursts of effort cannot match. Progress compounds quietly under disciplined behavior. Discipline creates reliability. When you follow through on your commitments, you begin to trust yourself. That self-trust builds confidence that does not depend on external validation. In competitive environments, discipline narrows the gap faster than intelligence or creativity. Those who are willing to show up consistently surpass those who rely on intensity alone. Sustainability beats spurts. Discipline sharpens focus. By eliminating distractions and enforcing boundaries, it channels attention toward priorities. This clarity allows for deeper work and higher quality output. Emotion-led action creates inconsistency. Discipline provides stability when motivation fades. It ensures progress continues even during low energy or high pressure periods. Discipline strengthens resilience. Each completed task, especially when difficult, reinforces your capacity to endure discomfort. Over time, challenges that once felt heavy become routine. High performers do not rely on willpower alone. They design systems that support disciplined behavior. Structure replaces guesswork and reinforces momentum. Discipline compounds over time. Early efforts may show little return, but persistence builds momentum. Eventually, progress accelerates as habits align with long-term objectives. Discipline raises standards. When expectations become non-negotiable, mediocrity no longer feels acceptable. This shift elevates performance across all areas. Discipline is a form of self-respect. It reflects a willingness to honor commitments to yourself, even when no one is watching. That integrity creates inner stability. In environments where many quit early, discipline becomes a differentiator. Endurance outlasts enthusiasm. Those who remain consistent advance simply because they stayed in the game. Discipline transforms effort into identity. What begins as structured behavior evolves into a way of operating, shaping how you work, decide, and respond under pressure. Creation shifts you from passive participation to active ownership. When you create, you decide direction, pace, and outcome instead of reacting to what is placed in front of you. Consumption absorbs time and attention, while creation converts them into tangible progress. Most people begin their day consuming before they have produced anything of value. This trains the mind to respond rather than initiate. Over time, reactivity becomes a habit and output becomes optional. Consumption without intention leads to mental clutter. Information piles up without application, creating the illusion of progress while results remain unchanged. Knowledge unused has no leverage. Creation demands clarity. To produce something, you must think, decide, and execute. This process refines understanding and strengthens focus far more than passive intake ever could. When you create, you engage problem-solving muscles. Each attempt reveals gaps in skill and understanding, making growth unavoidable. Consumption hides those gaps behind borrowed confidence. Creation builds confidence through evidence. Every completed piece of work becomes proof of capability. Confidence earned through action is durable and self-sustaining. Consumption often inflates comparison. Observing others' progress without creating your own work distorts perception and undermines momentum. Creation grounds attention in personal development. The act of creating clarifies priorities. Limited time and energy force you to focus on what matters most. This constraint sharpens decision-making. Creation transforms ideas into assets. Written thoughts, built systems, and produced work continue to serve you long after the effort is complete. Consumption ends when attention moves elsewhere. Learning accelerates through creation. Teaching, building, and experimenting integrate knowledge into usable skill. Doing reveals insight that reading alone cannot provide. Creation strengthens discipline. Output requires commitment beyond interest. Each creative session reinforces follow-through and reduces reliance on inspiration. Consumption is easy to justify because it feels productive. Creation exposes resistance and demands accountability. This is why progress favors those who build rather than browse. Creating early in the day establishes momentum. It positions you as a driver rather than a passenger, influencing how the rest of your time unfolds. Those who create shape narratives instead of accepting them. They contribute perspective rather than echo opinion. Influence grows from expression, not observation. A life oriented around creation steadily gains direction, purpose, and measurable outcomes that reflect effort converted into form.